Hello, I'm Rachel Greger. I'm the Curatorial and Collections Assistant here at the Virginia Quilt Museum. My job is to take care of all of the quilts, all of our sewing machines, and our accompanying material culture here at the Quilt Museum. In terms of material culture, we have things that come in as people donate things that go with their stories of their quilts. We also have the archaeological remains that were found here at the Warren Sipe House, which is where the Virginia Quilt Museum is currently housed and has been since 1995. We are celebrating in October National Archaeology Month, and it's also our 25th year here at the Warren Sipe House. So today we're going to do a program discussing the archaeology found here at the program and then discussing the history of the house. So what is archaeology exactly? I studied anthropology here at James Madison University, and I've worked at several different dig sites and historical homes. And I can tell you for a fact that archaeology is not what you find on TV. It is not Indiana Jones or Tomb Raider. We don't get to look at dinosaur bones, and we don't get to keep the things that we find. Archaeology is the sub-study of anthropology. Anthropology is the field of human culture and the study of past civilizations and current civilizations, while archaeology looks more specifically at the material culture that's left behind. And there's two different subfields of archaeology as well. One is prehistoric archaeology, or it's also known as pre-contact period. Those are all of the historical records that come before we have historical writing. Whereas historical archaeology is once we have that written record to accompany these material culture items. You may also be wondering what exactly is an artifact. It is anything that humans have modified or interacted with. This can range from jewelry, silverware, bowls, glasses, or even a campfire that's left at a site. In fact, archaeology actually includes anything that's older than 50 years old as an artifact. So archaeologists dig in layers, and they focus on the law of superposition. This law basically says that deeper something is in the soil, the older it is. So you can think of like a cake or lasagna, or anything you like to eat that has layers. When you go ahead and you make that lasagna, that first noodle you put in at the very bottom, that's going to be technically the oldest noodle. In terms of archaeology, the oldest something is in the ground, the deeper it's going to be. If that doesn't help, we can think about this a little bit more literally. If you go out on your front lawn and you have all that grass and all that topsoil, that's called topsoil. Everything that's underneath it, that's going to be older in history. So, I mean, it's a little tricky to try to differentiate this the deeper you go in to the ground, but archaeologically speaking and getting that training, you're going to learn the different textures of soil and the different colors of soil. So you may be interested in how deep archaeologists actually dig. The short answer is you dig until you reach this layer of soil called subsoil. This layer of soil has had no human interaction with. Commonly here in Virginia, you know you've reached subsoil when it's bright red and it's kind of clay-like and it's really difficult to dig in. Because this soil hasn't had any interaction with humans or with people, it shouldn't have any artifacts in it, so we normally don't dig it. Archaeologists dig in units. Units are normally square-shaped. If you go to a historical home, you'll probably see us digging in a square. After this, we go ahead and we dig that unit down in its layers, and then we'll swap over to another unit and open that one up until we just create a bigger and bigger square, a bigger rectangle, until we cover our entire site. This is really important because while you've just learned we dig in layers to know exactly that time period, by recording what unit we found an object in, that can tell us the general area of something. For example, if we're trying to find a blacksmith and we're on a giant site, where the unit we find most of the metal objects, more than likely that's where the blacksmith was set up. Archaeologists use multiple different tools at a site, depending on what they're working with. So if we're trying to move large amounts of soil, we could use either a round shovel or a square shovel. And if we're trying to either clean a unit or just get a small amount of soil out, we'll sometimes use our handy dandy trowel. It's our most important tool at an archaeological site, and a lot of archaeologists get very attached to their trowels. To clean, we'll use a trowel, we'll also use a dustpan, and we'll use the end of a broom. We also use a screen. You'll see that at a lot of archaeological sites. This shaker screen will separate the dirt from the artifacts, and we'll collect the artifacts and we'll leave the dirt to backfill the unit later. There's also an extensive record that we try to keep at an archaeological site. This is because it's a lot of responsibility. When you're the first person to dig up an artifact that's 2,000 years old, you want to make sure that there's a very good set of data that goes along with this artifact. That is the most important part of the archaeological record, is the data. Archaeologists also work in labs, and they clean, analyze, catalog the objects. There's a bunch of different ways you can clean an object, but most commonly we just use a toothbrush and some water. After cleaning these artifacts, we're going to catalog it. We try to figure out what the object is, and then we label it and see if it can mend with anything. In terms of labeling, we want to be very specific because a lot of artifacts look like other artifacts. So we want to be very specific about what unit we found it in and what layer we found it in. All of these labels have a very unique number. It tells you the field site, the unit, and the layer that it was found in. And you want to make sure that this label is visible, but you also don't want it to take away from the object when you label it. Archaeological sites, archaeological homes, and any museum tries to keep our collections nice and clean and as well as preserved as well as we can. We focus on temperature control and humidity control, and we attempt to control these aspects with dehumidifiers and also constant monitoring. Here we have one of the boxes that we store our artifacts in. This is an acid-free box. It's the same thing we store our quilts in. Keeping the acid out is very helpful to not further degrade any of our objects. We also package things with acid-free paper for the same reason. Here we have a shard of a bowl. It alone can tell us a lot. It can also not tell us a lot because it is just a lone shard. However, we right here have a mended bowl. It's very similar. The rims are almost identical. However, you see it obviously doesn't fit right here. Doesn't say that it doesn't not fit right here. More than likely it does connect here. However, there's no way for us to best attach it here without magic, essentially. So we're just going to keep it stored separately, but we're going to at least know that these two pieces are either from the same bowl or this shard comes from a bowl that looks just like this. Now we're going to look at a few objects in particular. These objects will be on display here at the Warren Sipe House at the Virginia Quilt Museum, on the bottom floor of the museum at the end of the stairs, and they're also in our History of the House exhibit. Here are some aspects of our ceramics that we found here. Obviously not all of them are put out for you to see today, but these are some cool highlights that I thought you may be interested in. We have three main types of ceramics that were found here. These are earthenwares, stonewares, as well as porcelain. Each of these types and these subtypes can tell you a lot about the people who lived here at the Warren Sipe House due to the type, the age, and the decoration. The type and the age tells us when people were here, and it can also indicate the wealth of the people who were living here. Right here are coarse earthenwares. They are utilitarian. They do look a lot like modern day terracotta potters that you may have at home. These are very porous, so if you wanted to store water in them or some other liquid, you'd have to put this thick black lead glaze on it. Either with the glaze, like you see examples of here, or without the glaze. These fragments would more than likely have been used to hold food or some sort of liquid. We have another form of earthenware. These are the refined earthenwares. There are three main types: creamware, pearlware, and whiteware. The difference between them all is the color. For the most part, we have one example of creamware that was found here, and that is a more creamish off-white type of color. Blue, this bluish tint here, that's pearlware. It often pools. We have an example of that here. And we also have some examples of whiteware as well. And here we have some nice decorations that were found on a couple of our ceramics. We also have some examples of porcelain that were found at the house. We have some plain shards of it, and we also have some very pretty hand decorated with gold leaf pressed into it. So these are very impressive examples of porcelain, and they're also just very pretty to look at. These would be the kind of like the guest china, like modern day examples. Our last type of ceramic that we're going to talk about real quick is stoneware. So this is a lot like that original earthenware that we talked about over here. However, it is actually very impermeable. I'm apologizing. Impermeable. It can be refined to be used as tea or tableware. Most of these pieces are very thick though, so they were probably storing other aspects of food and beverage. Okay. We also have examples of glass that were found here at the house. There are two real types of glass. We have window glass here. It is flat, it is probably used for a window. And then we have more rounded, interestingly shaped glass, and it's colored. This would be bottle glass. We have multiple different colors, including the blues, the aquas, we have brown, and we have green. We also have a lip and neck of a bottle. It contains bubbles. It also doesn't have a seam, and it's a little funky looking. So more than likely this was a hand-blown bottle at one point. We also have full bottles and also partial bottles that were found. We have another little neck and lip. Hopefully we can repair him a little bit more, just like we've been working on this guy. This one actually is still embossed, which is pretty cool. So one of our interns will be researching this bottle a little bit more so we can find out more about the people who lived here. This cute one right here happens to be my favorite. It is fully intact, and due to its size, it more than likely would have held perfume or probably a medicine. Before we talk about some of the cooler, older, fun finds that we found here, I just thought I would mention the more modern stuff we found. We have a bunch of these little plates, and look how perfectly mended it's been. We have a handful of these plates that have been mended just like this. They are more recent, mid to late 1900s. We also have this glass. That's another example of that. We have found multiple pieces of glass like this, and I've worked to mend it. Other cool finds that are more modern: basic plastic poker chip, some pieces of a dart, and we also have some nice Pepsi bottle lids. So keep that in mind next time you come visit the Virginia Quilt Museum. Anything you drop may be excavated later and part of an archaeological collection. Here we have some more architectural materials that were found. A lot of it is plaster and mortar, possibly from more recent modifications. This looks like plumbing supplies, and these are screws, which are more recent. We also have a piece of tile flooring that one of our interns is very excited to continue researching. It's very interesting, very nicely decorated. As for the more fun stuff, nails happen to be one of my favorite types of archaeological remains. Because of how nails used to be made by hand, you wouldn't get them as easily as you would get nowadays at a Lowe's or a Home Depot. The house, we know it was made in 1956. That would mean any nails that were used in its construction would be from 1956 and before. More often than not, these would be the cut nails. They would not be handmade, they would be machine cut. We don't have a lot of nails found. That is possibly due to us still living in this house and working in this house. We have a handful of other metal objects. Just like the nails, they're very rusted over and they're difficult to understand what they are. Here's a hinge. We also have some rusted over dining utensils with bone handles. And this has been a very interesting piece to me in particular. Me and an intern have been looking over. It could possibly be an interior piece of a harmonica, which would be very interesting to have. We also have a handgun of shotgun shells and bullet casings. Here we have the tip of a spoon. That does not go with this set, so that's also interesting to know. We have several little porcelain figurines. This one in particular could be from a doll, similar to ones that we have in our collection. We also have little baby tea sets, both in glass and in metal. This piece right here, we initially thought maybe it's a broken piece of a chessboard. However, it is most likely a bottle stopper. We have a coin. Coins are very important to archaeology. They have dates on them. For example, this one is 1887 and it's actually a franc. So somebody more than likely traveled to Harrisonburg from France and brought this as a souvenir. We have a thimble, similar to many in our collection. And we have found multiple buttons from multiple time periods. Some are your regular plastic buttons. This one in particular has been great fascination to one of our interns. It is a military button. It's made out of brass and it is from Virginia. It is a Civil War button from between the 1830s and the 1860s. We are a stop on the Civil War historical track, so it's very likely and very obvious that that is what this is. This has also been a really cool find to us initially because this is a historical home. We thought maybe it would be a doorknob. Under further investigation, it is actually a salt cellar. Before salt was able to fit through the little holes in your salt shaker, it would often clump. So they would have a salt cellar like this. It would accompany a spoon, just like sugar would at a tea party, and you would scoop salt out of this. So it's very cool. It went obsolete in the 1910s because a anti-caking agent was added to salt, so it could go through a salt shaker. And out of everything, this happens to be my favorite find. It is a wedding band. It's made out of most likely brass, and it is most likely from the 1800s. There are some fingerprint marks still cased on it, which is very interesting. And after measuring it, it is a size 8, which is more than likely a man's ring. So that has a very interesting history behind it that we may never get to know. I know I'm sorry. I don't know where I put bones on here. Okay. Here we have a few bones that were found on the property. All of them are faunal, meaning that they are from animals. They are not from people. There are multiple laws in archaeology about what we do to human remains if they are found, and we have not had to deal with that. These all are animals, and they can indicate, their findings indicate what the people who lived here ate. The large majority of these are either cow or pig. You can see a couple cuts from where they have been butchered. We also have some smaller ones that are probably from poultry. This one happens to be my favorite. It's a little mouse bone. And we also have a piece of a turtle shell. So that's pretty interesting. We have two other shells you can see here, both oyster and mollusk. More than likely they were using these to eat, and they would have been imported from the Chesapeake Bay.
Here at the Virginia Quilt Museum, we nurture and celebrate Virginia's quilting history. We know that the quilts you come actively to see are created for many different reasons with many varieties of inspiration. As we continue our program on archaeology, we want to highlight a quilt in our collection called Pottery in Another Context. This contemporary art quilt was created by Julia Paff in 1993. Julia began quilting around the age of 10 and went on to get her bachelor's in art history from the University of Toronto and then a master's in fine art from Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. She worked for over 19 years as an archaeological technical artist in Greece, Egypt, and Jordan. She says, "I see archaeology's quest for historical and cultural identity as a metaphor for the individual's search for identity." This quilt is composed of hand-dyed and hand-painted fabrics, as well as fabric printed with images based off of the artifacts that Julia had drawn during her field excavations. This quilt was pieced both by hand and by machine. We are very lucky and very happy to have Julia's piece in our permanent collection.
So we have a bunch of marbles and a bunch of buttons that were found on property. I just want to go over a couple of the marbles. Both the marbles and the buttons, we have stuff that are more recent examples as well as historic examples, like we just talked about with this Civil War button. As for marbles, we have some clay marbles that would have been early on, and we also have a lot more of these recent glass marbles, as well as this one, which I really like because it was broken, so we're working on mending it. This just indicates, as we already know from the U.S. Census records, that kids were living here at the property. This concludes today's program. I'm really happy you took time out of your day to learn about our archaeology and our house here at the Virginia Quilt Museum. We currently have a couple exhibits still up to the public. 2 of which are brand new. One covers Lena Bainey. She is an avid quilter who sadly passed away this year. The exhibit is up in her honor. It contains pieces of our permanent collection as well as pieces on loan from her family. We also have opening next week, the week of the 27th, is Worldwide Threads Eastern Asia, and it is exploring Eastern Asian culture through textiles. Thank you again for coming to this program. If you're interested in any of the archaeological information, it will be on display here at the Virginia Quilt Museum. Have a good day.